This is my synthesizer. Real quick, not all the keys work because this keyboard was harvested from Goodwill and I had to reverse engineer how it worked. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but some of the buttons work and all of that works because this is just a very simple passive component. This is an ESP32 microcontroller. It's the brains of it. And then there's basically just some knobs here. We've got volume. We've also, is the volume all the way up? It is. It's not super loud. I don't remember. That's the length. That's the length of how long the key press events happen. This is how much the key press events kind of can sway up and down. And that's pretty much it. And this whole side of things here, this whole breadboard, I'm going to completely ignore. I'm not going to explain it all, but I'm going to point to a really good video that I just followed that guy's tutorial to make the sequencer, which was a really fun part of the project. But he did such a good job of explaining it that I'm not even going to bother. So now we're going to jump into the code because I think that's the next step for understanding the project. So these lines here are how sound is generated digitally. And so ignore everything except this. And what this is saying is that on pin 25, so on the brains of the computer, it has all these pins where it can give out a signal or take in a signal. On pin 25, it's sending out a signal of high, 255. That's the highest it can go. And then it sends out that high signal for some amount of time. And then it turns off the signal for the same amount of time. And then it just repeats over and over and over again, I believe. Or maybe the whole function runs over and over and over again. Yeah. But it's just signal, no signal, signal, no signal, signal, no signal at the exact right timing. And the timing is what makes the pitch. And that's it. And we can also look here. So if you imagine that's how we made the sound, we'll now take a step back a little bit. We actually are having a loop that runs that does some more things. It checks the values of those little knobs and it gets what those knob values are. And then depending on those and other things, it will make a different sound. And then the other thing it does is that keyboard, that Goodwill harvested keyboard. So I had to reverse engineer that, and the code is pretty hacky. So basically, every loop of my program, I'm sending a bunch of signals to the keyboard, and then depending on whether a key is pressed or not, different stuff is going to come back. And depending on what is coming back, I identify keys. Not all of them though, because G and C for some reason or was it C sharp? I don't know. A couple of keys just didn't work. I just couldn't get them to work. But anyways, I identify the key that got pressed, and then I make the sound of it. And then also while we're here, this is the repo. I'll put this link in the description, and I did this for school, so I had to make a whole bunch of docs and stuff. Yep, there's more notes as it gets higher. And if I were to take the volume down, well, you can't hear it anymore. Oh, there it goes. Yep. You can see that the volume, you probably can't hear that, but you can see it, that the volume is just the height. What's that? Is that the amplitude of the wave? And then the other kind of interesting thing is we've been looking at, I believe, a sine wave. Now, you can hear the difference and you can also see the difference. And I believe, okay, yeah. So that one is the saw wave. And then this one is I think the square wave, if you can believe it. It's not very square at all. That's partly, I think, the calibration of my oscilloscope is just very not very good. And I apologize for that. But I don't know what I'm doing. And this is a screenshot. It's pretty blurry, but I think it still works. Or let's zoom in. So you can kind of see here the little steps. So that's what that it's digital. Like that's what we're seeing there. I have my program which is mathematically making a sine wave, but the sine wave is made at a certain resolution. And it's low enough that you can actually see the steps. You can't necessarily hear that super but that's what's kind of great about the oscilloscope is you can see something and hear it and kind of have two ways in to understanding the phenomena rather than just trying to hear it or just trying to see it. The last thing I haven't really talked about is that toy keyboard. And so this is actually a different toy keyboard, also scrounged from Goodwill. And this is just a screenshot. I was going to make this a much more ambitious video where I actually kind of like did another keyboard, but then I decided that was too much work. But what I just want to highlight while we're here is this little ribbon. That's the exact same way that my keyboard in my project is connected. And so it like what I did was I just cut that ribbon. And then this here is the microcontroller. This is a commercial microcontroller. You notice that little blob there, this little blob, that's actually hiding the good stuff. And so this whole microcontroller is an incredible thing. Leonardo da Vinci would have like cut off his arm to have this sent back in time to him, but it's, worth like $3. But what you can do is you can just take some of these components and then the component, like kind of the way I think about it is, okay, well, we have all these connections and if we just can get that so a computer, if we can just get it so a computer can be getting signals from all of those connections, well, then we can press keys and then with print statements we can see what happens. And then with some logic, we can make the key presses execute digital logic. And so real quick, without further ado, I've connected this to a GPIO pin and I've added a little bit of logic. So now when we press this F, and so I didn't actually make the video like a whole thing because it just got to be too much work. But this is just a nice example of how kind of simple it can be. So I have a Raspberry Pi here. I have some very basic connections going from the keyboard into the Raspberry Pi, and then the Raspberry Pi goes out to a speaker. And so from a key press event, we do get, and I'm pretty sure that's an F, or it's close enough. I don't know if it was an F, but we could create an event with just a little bit of code and play a note. So that's that. Thank you for watching, and feel free to ask questions or look further at the code. And don't be afraid to go to the Goodwill and go to the toy electronics section, and you can get really like look for things that mention Bluetooth, look for things that mention STEM education, and then bring your phone and Google things because sometimes word parents will create ID, like half-baked SDKs and stuff. And it's a great way to learn and it's fun.